We're just over a month away from the starts of fall camp. Maybe a month and some change, but it's getting closer, right? And close your eyes and it'll be here before you know it. What are the national publications? Where are they ranking Tennessee entering the 2023 season? A top 10 selection or top 10 preseason pick by one publication. Who is it? That and a whole lot more here on your Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good Thursday, everybody. Welcome into it. Locked On Vols, and I am Eric Kane. @_Kaner is where you can find me on Twitter and at Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys for being here and you everydayers for coming back each and every day. Can't do this show without you, where we build the shows in the off season. So I really do appreciate all you guys. Got a fun show coming up here today. Segment one, we're going to spend kind of looking at where Tennessee's ranked in terms of some of the publications nationally. Athlon Sports put out their preseason top 25. Pro Football Focus put out their top 25 a couple days ago. Where Tennessee ranked in those rankings? Plus, the first annual, hilarious, I love that phrase, right? It's totally incorrect. The first annual ACC SEC challenge in basketball. Tennessee squaring off against Carolina. I've got some thoughts on that. That's in segment one. And then in segments 2 and 3, we're going to catch up with the host of Locked On Bulldogs, Daniel Monroe. And he's going to tell us all about Georgia this spring, kind of the outlook for the Bulldogs. And obviously, that's going to be a big-time matchup. Tennessee's biggest matchup, arguably, on the schedule, at least in the SEC East. It definitely is. Could be the SEC East Championship, if you will. We're going to learn all about Georgia this spring, heading into the new year with Daniel Monroe of Locked On Bulldogs. That's coming up in segments 2 and 3. All right. Appreciate you guys, as always, for subscribing to the show on Locked On Vols, the YouTube channel, and wherever you get your podcast. This is Locked On Vols, your first listen each and every day. Athlon Sports put out its top 25 yesterday, and it has Tennessee coming in at number 15 in its preseason rankings. That is the fourth highest team in the Southeastern Conference. You've got Georgia at 1. Alabama is at number 2, according to Athlon Sports. You've got LSU at number 6, and then Tennessee comes in at number 15. Some other notables from the SEC and the Athlon top 25 preseason rankings. You have A&M at 20, Ole Miss at 21. So not a whole lot of SEC love in these preseason rankings from Athlon, but Tennessee is considered a top 15 pick or a top 15 team heading into the 2023 season, according to Athlon Sports. If you're wondering what that top 10 looks like, it's Georgia at 1, Michigan at 2, Alabama at 3, USC at 4, Ohio State at 5, LSU at 6, Florida State, the darling of the offseason, right? It's there at number 7, Penn State is at 8, Washington's at 9, Utah's at 10, and we'll just go ahead and go down to Tennessee. 11 is Texas, 12 is Clemson, 13 is Oregon, 14 is Notre Dame, and then 15 is Tennessee, right in front of Oklahoma, which comes in at number 16. So that's what the Athlon Sports rankings look like. What about the Pro Football Focus preseason rankings? A lot of you guys don't like PFF. That's fine. PFF doesn't like Tennessee a lot of times, I feel like, but PFF likes Tennessee heading into the 2023 season. Tennessee coming in at number 9, a top 10 preseason ranking. This is the highest that I've seen so far this offseason, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the highest that I've seen so far heading into the season, and there'll be some more polls that'll come out. But Tennessee comes in at number 9, still the fourth highest SEC team, though. Georgia's at 1. Alabama is at number 2. LSU is at number 8, right in front of Tennessee, and then the Volunteers are at number 9. Other SEC teams, according to Pro Football Focus, in their top 25, you've got Arkansas at 18, Kentucky at 19, Florida, yikes, at 20, South Carolina at 22, and Mississippi State at 23. And of course, Pro Football Focus, they do things a little bit differently, but this is their rankings coming into the 2023 season, with, of course, Georgia sitting at the top. We'll learn more about Georgia here in just a moment. It uses its ELO rankings. That's kind of how Pro Football Focus does theirs. A lot of returning production, kind of like the ESPN, not exactly like the ESPN metrics, but kind of factoring in returning production is big for Pro Football Focus. And though Tennessee lost a lot, it's still returning a lot, and that's coming in at number 9. You look at the top 10 overall. Georgia's at 1, Alabama's at 2, Ohio State is at 3, Michigan is at number 4, Texas is at 5, Clemson is at 6, Penn State is at 7, LSU is at 8, Tennessee's at 9, and USC is at number 10. As you can tell, the Pro Football Focus rankings greatly differ from that of Athlon Sports, and I would imagine that Pro Football Focus is going to look a lot different from the majority of the national plaudits. But this is kind of where I thought Tennessee would be. I think Tennessee will be a preseason top 20 team. I'm not sure if Tennessee will be a top 10 team, but anywhere from 17-18 to 12-13 is kind of where I see Tennessee. So, of course, the Volunteers come in at number 9 here to Pro Football Focus, and number 15 according to Athlon. That's kind of on par with what I see. All right, let's shift gears here. Let's go to the hardwood. We knew that the ACC SEC Challenge was going to start and be a thing, but when the games were announced on Wednesday, it was like first annual. Well, here's I'm not the smartest guy out there. I mean, I couldn't even pronounce the former Michigan quarterback's name yesterday on the show. You remember? But annual means it happens every year. You can't have first annual or you can't have second annual. Annual should start at year 3. Second annual, that doesn't work. First annual, that doesn't work. It should just be, here's the tip-off for the brand new SEC ACC Challenge. And then next year should be the second edition of the SEC ACC Challenge. And then in year 3, it should be the annual SEC ACC Challenge. I think they're branding it the other way, ACC SEC. But anyway, I think that's funny. But nice little draw here for Tennessee, right? Tennessee is going to be on the road, going to Chapel Hill, and will take on the Tar Heels on Wednesday, November 29th at 7:15. I would imagine that's going to be on ESPN. It's going to be on ESPN for sure. But, that's a pretty good draw for Tennessee. Lady Vols on the other side, they will go Wednesday, November 29th as well at 5 o'clock. Notre Dame will travel to Thompson-Boling Arena and take on the Lady Vols. So a little doubleheader for the ACC SEC Challenge here. Lady Vols at 5 on the 29th of November against Notre Dame, and then Tennessee in the nightcap on the road in Chapel Hill against the Tar Heels at 7:15. So that should be exciting. You look at the other games, and I got to be honest with you, the ACC, when I was growing up, the ACC was the best, conference in college basketball, hands down. It wasn't even close. I mean, it was close, but the ACC was really, really good. And there's still some teams there. I mean, there's still some good teams, but the parity in the sport is kind of all over the place, right? There's not a whole lot of good matchups, to be completely honest with you. Like Kentucky gets Miami. I guess that's a pretty good matchup, right? Kentucky gets Miami. Alabama, Clemson, they're playing. The top 2 matchups, no matter what. I mean, Wake Forest and Florida might be something. I don't know. The best 2 matchups, hands down, is Tennessee at UNC and Duke at Arkansas. And Tennessee just played Duke, I get it. But Tennessee played Carolina recently as well. We'll get to that in a moment. But I thought it'd be really, really cool if Tennessee were to travel to Cameron Indoor Stadium and play the Blue Devils in Durham. But they're going to go to just 8 miles down Tobacco Road and take on UNC. But the 2 best games in this, at least for year 1, at least on paper, in my opinion, Tennessee at Carolina and Duke at Arkansas. Arkansas, that game with Duke's going to be at 9:15, so it'll be 2 hours after the start. I very easily could be a doubleheader there with Tennessee starting first, and then the nightcap would be the Duke-Arkansas game. So we'll see exactly what it looks like. So that's kind of what it looks like for the, wait for it, first annual ACC SEC Challenge. Rick Barnes, obviously he's no stranger to Carolina, faced them annually, played them annually when he was the head coach at Clemson, and man, he would get into some fights with Dean Smith, right? I mean, they would verbally just assault each other all the time and sometimes go after each other, and it got so bad at one point in time, the ACC commissioner called them both in the office and said, all right, sit down. You guys got to cut it out, right? So Barnes is no stranger to Carolina, having coached in the ACC and at Clemson for years, and he's played Carolina once, I believe. I think just one time since being at Tennessee, and it was at Chapel Hill during the 2016-2017 season where Tennessee fell 73-71. So if my memory serves me correct, that is the last time Tennessee's played Carolina. But anyway, you look at this pre-conference schedule for Tennessee, the basketball team is pretty sharp, right? Of course, you pick up Carolina in the ACC SEC Challenge. That's November the 29th. You're going to play Wisconsin in the Maui Invitational. You are playing Illinois. You're hosting Illinois. You're playing NC State in that neutral site game in San Antonio. That's in the middle of December. So that's pretty strong non-conference slate for Tennessee basketball. And Rick Barnes loves challenging out of the gate, being challenged out of the gate to better prepare them for what's to come in conference play. And, of course, to help you out in seeding. But as we've seen, whoever's on the committee, it's just kind of whatever they think that day, all right? Do these really, really tough games in November and December mean a whole lot in the second week of March? I don't know. I mean, that's a conversation for another day. I believe they do, but sometimes it's been proven that the committee doesn't care. But anyway, Rick Barnes is always going to schedule tough, and that's a pretty decent little non-conference schedule that we know of so far. So, segment one, a couple of preseason rankings for Tennessee football. No surprise, number 15 in Athlon, number 9 according to Pro Football Focus. Where do you believe Tennessee should be ranked heading into the 2023 season? I think Tennessee should be in the mid-teens. That's kind of what I'm expecting from the bigger publications, the Coaches Poll, USA Today, all that type of stuff, coming up, entering the season. Hey, when we come back, we're going to catch up with Daniel Monroe, segments 2 and 3. He's going to tell us all about Georgia, the expectations, the roster, new quarterbacks, trying to find new faces on defense, all that and more. We're going to look ahead to the 2023 schedule, to the biggest game on that schedule for the Volunteers. That's a game in November at Neyland Stadium against Georgia. And host of Locked On Bulldogs, Daniel Monroe, will help us out in previewing that game here when we come back. But hey, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. It's baseball season right now, and you can take your swing at the MLB and FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets. That's up to $2,000. And that's right, just bet $20, all right, and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you like or who you think is going to be, having the first home run, the run scored, whatever the case may be. Those props are out there, and they're a whole lot of fun to play. All on the app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you don't have to wait around. You get paid instantly over at FanDuel Sportsbook. There's no better place to bet on MLB than on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So, sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200. $200. I'll say it again. $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, guys, as I said, we're going to talk about Georgia football, previewing Tennessee's 2023 opponents and the biggest nemesis, I guess, right now in the SEC East, and it won't be that way much longer because, of course, divisions are going away, is, of course, the Georgia Bulldogs, the two-time defending national champions. And over from Locked On Bulldogs, we have Daniel Monroe. Daniel, appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Happy to get on and chat. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. From the top rope, let me ask you a question.
Okay,
Is Tennessee the biggest obstacle for Georgia to have a three-peat this year?
Ooh. I'm going to say no, but not for the reason that you think.
Okay.
I think the answer is no because while Tennessee is without a doubt the toughest team on Georgia's schedule this year, the biggest obstacle to a three-peat is not yet scheduled for Georgia. It's not on Georgia's schedule at this moment. I think there's still a path to the SEC championship game and therefore to a college football playoff, a national championship, even if Georgia loses in Knoxville. Obviously, it will require 2 SEC losses from Tennessee, with one of them not being Georgia, which maybe is an unlikely scenario. But I think there's still a path forward there, and then Georgia would have to get through Alabama or LSU in the title game. And then I think Georgia would face its biggest obstacle to a three-peat. But I think Tennessee is without a doubt Georgia's biggest obstacle to an undefeated season, Georgia's biggest obstacle to the biggest roadblock, the only team in the SEC that could find its way to Atlanta ahead of Georgia is Tennessee. There's no question in my mind about that.
In that game so late in the season, so much is going to be on the line, just like last year. So it should be a whole lot of fun. This might be a silly question, but I want to ask it. I mean, college football is all about turnover, and Georgia's no different. There was a lot of turnover from last year to this past year, and you went on and won another natty. And that's what goes to show you what good recruiting after good recruiting after good recruiting does. But there's turnover. You're missing a lot of guys that were on that national championship winning team defensively, missing your quarterback. The expectation in Athens, is it national championship yet again?
That's definitely the expectation in Athens. It's definitely national championship. I think Georgia has found its way into that tier of program that they have been dying to be a part of for decades now, which is the very, very small group of teams that every single year come into the season thinking if we're going to win the national championship this year. And so that's obviously a big hurdle and a big obstacle. I think Georgia has experienced some turnover. Not as much turnover as they did 2 years ago, which I think gives Georgia fans a lot of confidence. But if Georgia fans are honest, right now they are beating their chest about how we had 15 players drafted 2 years ago, and then we went 15-0, won a national championship, blah, blah, blah. But before last season, no honest Georgia fan would have said that they weren't nervous about that they weren't nervous about Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt and Nakobe Dean and all of those outstanding players that they lost 2 years ago. I think the fact that they saw this coaching staff be able to replace them, plug in new players, and have not just similar but greater success in the upcoming season. I think that is what gives Georgia fans a lot of confidence. But you lose guys like Jalen Carter, you lose guys like Keely Ringo. You lose guys like Christopher Smith, even who wasn't that high of a draft pick, but has been a stalwart on the back end of that defense for season after season now. It is not a small thing to replace elite talent like that. I think the good thing for Georgia is there's plenty of talent to go around. And you just have to have those guys live up to the hype, live up to the expectations. And there's no way to know that with recruiting rankings. There's no way to know that with high school tape. You only know if a player is going to have it or not when they take the field and they play in the SEC. And so it remains to be seen with a lot of very important positions, most notably interior defensive line and quarterback. It remains to be seen if they have it or not.
Let's talk about quarterback. Stetson Bennett, for all the jokes, and I talk about this on the when Georgia comes up, and I say this on my podcast all the time. Props to Stetson Bennett. I mean, he's college football legend. He really is. What the story's incredible, walk on, all that type of stuff, and wins a natty. He's got all this confidence and all that type of stuff. However, and please tell me where I'm wrong here. He got better, and he wasn't bad. He wasn't a bad quarterback, but regardless, Georgia's getting an upgrade. From a pure talent perspective at the quarterback position. Carson Beck, you got Brock Vandergriff, you got Gunnar Stockton, which, by the way, sidebar real quick, what does Kirby tell all those guys to keep them on campus? I mean, why are they still there?
That's to keep them on campus. I really appreciate the way that you phrased that, because I think the question people always ask is, how does Kirby get these guys to commit to Georgia? And that's not hard, because what people don't understand about elite recruits is that they believe inherently they are better than anyone else. Yeah. And Kirby just tells kids, and he's very open about this, he just tells kids, I promise you, if you come to Georgia, I haven't already picked the starting quarterback. You will have a chance to earn the job. And Stetson Bennett is the greatest proof of that has ever existed. 5-star JT Daniels, that had, quote-unquote, all the talent in the world, is now on his 4th college team and just sort of a bouncing around journeyman. Like, Stetson Bennett had the opportunity to win the job. He did win the job. And recruits see that, and they think to themselves, well, I'm better than all these other guys, so I'll come. Now, Why have they not transferred? And I think after the spring, you still might see a Georgia quarterback transfer. So because they haven't transferred yet, I think because Georgia hasn't named, Kirby has been honest and said, I don't know who the starting quarterback is going to be. And Georgia fans get all up in arms, and I think it's going to be Carson Beck. Georgia fans think it's going to be Carson Beck. I'm sure you think it's going to be Carson Beck. Mm-hmm. Carson Beck is probably the favorite to win the job. But Kirby knows he doesn't have to make those decisions yet, doesn't see any need to name a starter, and because the number one value in the Georgia football program under Kirby Smart, and this is the biggest difference between him and Mark Richt, who I love as a human being and a football coach. The number one difference is that Kirby values competition above everything else. He wants elite players competing against other elite players so that the best guy will win the job. And so you may see quarterbacks transfer out of Georgia, but as a Georgia fan, you got to trust the coaching staff and trust the system and know that, like, if Brock Vandagriff decides that he wants to go somewhere else, that's fine. He wasn't the guy that won the job. And so that's just, and it's going to be the same because Gunnar Stockton will be there next year. Brock may be there next year. And you got Dylan Raiola coming in. You got 2 Elite 11 quarterbacks coming in to Georgia next year. Some of them aren't going to play, but if you hope as a Georgia fan, the best ones will.
Yeah. I mean, there's only one quarterback on every team. There's a couple receivers, a lot of offensive linemen, running backs rotation, defensive rotation, but just one quarterback.
Just the one.
Yeah, just the one. We'll continue asking about the Georgia offense, losing some star power, but I think this Georgia offense can be better than last year. And I want to ask Daniel about that on the other side as we preview the Georgia Bulldogs in Tennessee, that November game coming up later in the season. This is Locked On Vols. I got Daniel Monroe here. He's the host of Locked On Bulldogs as we look ahead to Tennessee's opponents' 2023 schedule. The big one, the one you're going to circle, coming in November, just like this past year, it's Tennessee and Georgia, and it should be a great, great atmosphere at Neyland Stadium. Daniel, we talked about the quarterback. Well, one more question about the quarterback.
Yep.
And I agree with you. I think Carson Beck's going to be the quarterback. You do, Georgia fans, college football fans. What can Carson Beck do better than Stetson Bennett, just from a quarterback standpoint? And, doesn't have the experience, doesn't have the swagger and all that. I get that'll come with playing time. But from a talent perspective, what does he do better than Stetson Bennett?
He's got a better arm than Stetson Bennett. Yep. Stetson Bennett was criticized about his arm because people looked at him and said he doesn't have a great arm. And Stetson Bennett does not throw the ball with great velocity, but he did throw a great deep ball. Stetson Bennett threw a very accurate deep ball. And typically in college football, you don't need to throw the ball as far as Anthony Richardson does to win football games, which is why Stetson Bennett won so many football games and Anthony Richardson didn't. But I digress. You need to be able to throw the ball accurately. Carson Beck definitely has a bigger arm. He's the least mobile of all the quarterbacks, and so that Stetson Bennett was much more athletic and mobile, I think, than Carson Beck. That could be a huge – the offensive system will need to be changed and tailored a bit to not rely on the quarterback's legs quite as much. But he definitely throws a ball with more velocity. He's got the confidence to throw it into tight windows. He is more of a prototypical stand up straight and throw the ball fast and hard quarterback, which is great. If he's making great decisions, that's great. If he's making poor decisions, that's terrible. And so I think there's legitimate reason to be nervous about Carson Beck, because while we Georgia fans have seen him make some elite throws, we've also seen him, throw pick sixes in garbage time in games that, when he came in and got playing time and, just throwing the ball out there towards the sideline when he had absolutely no business trying to make the throw. So decision making, as always, is going to be paramount for him.
Look at the rest of that offense, and I think Tennessee's running back room is one of the deepest rooms in the conference, and there's not a Superman, at least right now. There's not a Tarzan, but there's a whole lot of good players and experienced players. Look at Georgia's running back room. Kendall Milton's still there. You got Edwards. I remember when Branson Robinson was a prospect coming on his official visit here in Knoxville. Just 5'10", 245 pounds of muscle.
Yeah.
And again, you continue to add to that room. So that running back room's deep. And then the receiver room, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. I think it got better, obviously. You go out and get Dominic Lovett, who's a really, really good player. You had Ra Thomas. No, he had some off-the-field issues in the spring, but if he's in the fold, he's a great talent. You bring back Rosemary Jack Saint, who I remember torched Tennessee last year. It feels like at a skill position-wise, and of course you got Brock Bowers. I didn't even mention him. Georgia's pretty set. You just needed the ball to get in their hands.
The skill positions are as good at Georgia as they've been. And, you subtract A.D. Mitchell from the wide receiver room. He transfers to Texas. It's presumably a big loss. Coaching staff goes out and adds 2 transfers. You mentioned in Ra Thomas, who was cleared of all of his things, and I expect we'll see him play at Georgia. Nothing ever came of any of that, and then Dominic Lovett, who was maybe the best wide receiver on Missouri's team, and Missouri had a pretty good receiving core last year, including that 5-star freak kid that I can't remember his name.
Luther Brown.
Luther, yeah, and so Luther Burden, maybe, yeah.
Burden, yeah, Luther Burden. You're right.
But Dominic Lovett is a weapon. The issue is that he plays primarily in the slot. Obviously, Georgia has probably got more talent in the slot with Ladd McConkey than it does at any other position. And so, how are they going to be used? How are all these weapons going to be used? But it all comes back to I think the tight ends. Georgia's offense is built around the tight ends. You got Brock Bowers. And then you obviously lose the freak, Darnell Washington, who goes to Pittsburgh. But you replace him with a guy, Oscar Delp, who's honestly cut a little bit more like Brock Bowers. He's athletic. He's big, but he's not an ogre. And he's fast and quick and has great hands. And so the 2 best pass catchers on the team might play tight end this year. And the third best pass catcher on the team is kind of up for grabs. But honestly, in this offense, in this system, how many pass catchers do you really need? That's not. It's not like we need 5 guys out there running, because that's not the formations. Those aren't the patterns that Georgia's going to be running. They're not going to be out there playing the air raid style. Obviously going to be you're going to have running staying in the block, but then staying in the block. You might have 3 tight end sets that Georgia runs a lot this year, and so I think the depth and the talent in Georgia's offensive skill positions is as good as it's been.
Yeah, I would agree. It's going to be a challenge for every single team. It's going to be a challenge for Tennessee's defense no matter what. You look at Georgia's defense as we kind of wrap up this conversation. It is incredible how much talent has left Georgia's defense the last 2 seasons that have gone on and been first-round draft picks and all that. It's incredible how many play in Philadelphia now. But you look at this depth chart, man, you still got names, right? I like to play the name game. Names I know from recruiting, obviously from watching them on Saturdays. I mean, you got Jalen Walker. You've got Small Munden. You still got Javon Bullard, who's there. I mean, I guess it's just the luxury of recruiting well year after year. And, of course, being a winning football program right now, it's really just plug and play. What's kind of the story for Georgia's defense entering this new season?
I mentioned earlier, I think interior defensive line is probably a story. You had Bear Alexander transfer, who was kind of thought to maybe be the guy that was going to step in and get a lot more snaps on that interior defensive line. And so obviously Jalen Carter, gone. And so you're looking at guys now like Nazir Stackhouse, you're looking at guys like Zion Logue, and you're looking at guys like Warren Brinson, all 3 of which have been in the program for some time, and all 3 of which I think have been really solid players, but none of which meet the name game criteria that you were just playing. Like as you read through the Georgia depth chart, you're never going to stop at Warren Brinson's name.
Yeah.
But so will there be a relative lack of star power there as opposed to response on the defense? You got Malachi Starks, who was a true freshman last year, playing on the back end at safety. He was just burst onto the scene as a true freshman at safety. Put Javon Bullard next to him, who came on late last year. Everybody remembers the hit in the Ohio State game that he made. But he was the only Georgia player in the secondary that played well that entire game. Georgia's secondary got torched. Keely Ringo got torched. Everybody in that game got torched by Ohio State. But Javon Bullard played great the whole year. You return him, he might be the most underrated returning prospect for Georgia this year. And then the linebackers, you return all three. You've got a lot of talent at linebacker. And it seems as though you go all the way back to Alabama. And I know Tennessee fans are all too familiar with Bowl Cut Kirby and all of the things that he has done over the years. You go all the way back. And games are won in the trenches, yes. But when Kirby Smart has had elite linebackers, Kirby Smart has always had unbelievable defenses. And that's been true at Georgia as well. You go to Roquan Smith, obviously, 2017, took that team to a national championship game. And then Nakobe Dean and now Jamon Dumas-Johnson. You've had elite linebacker play. So the question is, will they be able to stand up against the run on the interior? Because I think the pass rush will be better for Georgia than it was last year. I think the secondary, which is crazy, even without Keely Ringo and Christopher Smith, I think the secondary could be better than it was last year. I think the linebacker play 100% will be better than it was last year. So the big question is, will teams be able to run up the middle on Georgia? Because that's the other thing about Kirby Smart. If he can't stop the run, his defense really struggles. Everything is predicated on that for him, and he believes in that 100% in shutting down the running game and then taking your chances on the outside. And so will they be able to do that with a regular, 3-4 down lineman? That remains to be seen, I think.
It's going to be a big game. It's going to be at Neyland Stadium. Going to be in the month of November, Tennessee and Georgia. And I think every college football fan is going to be excited to turn on the television, watch that at 3:30 on CBS, and take in what we hope will be a great football game. Georgia on its quest for a three-peat. Tennessee trying to play spoilers in the regular season and see what can happen. And for all the best Tennessee coverage, you know where to find us right here. But also, if you want to get the scouting report on Georgia kind of going into the season, or maybe one day in the fall when they got a big game coming up and you want to get a quick scout, go listen to Daniel. And, he's the host. He's co-host of Locked On Bulldogs. They do a great job over there. It's a great place to find your coverage for Georgia if you need it. Your scout, your early season scout. Daniel, appreciate it as always, man. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.